Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of 3A Composites Live Learning. With you as always, Alan Plunkett. Doing all the magic behind the scenes is Hannah Wells. She's really the one who makes all this drive from behind the scenes. And then joining me as always, my sidekick, Doug Twitchell. I'll let him introduce himself and our guest speaker, and Doug will give you a little idea of what we have on store for you today. So take it away, Doug.
Thanks, Alan. Good to be with everybody today. My name is Doug Twitchell. I'm Director of Distributor Relations at 3A Composites. I think what we have today to present to you is very timely and should be of a lot of interest to everybody, because we are all being affected by this day in and day out, whether it's in your own personal life with the costs that you're seeing and the inflation that you're seeing and how you're spending your money. But also what we're seeing is what's going on here at 3A and how this is affecting us and our products. You know, a lot of the products that we have are plastic based or have a component in them that is a plastic material. And so we want to take a look today, see what the driving forces are behind that, what that plastic, why the plastic is going up in price. You know, we're not real good at predicting the future. At least I'm not. I could show you my March Madness bracket, and that would convince you I'm not good at predicting the future. So we're gonna kind of tell you where we are, where things are. You can take a look at the information that we give you today, and you can take gives you an idea, I guess, of the direction that you can expect things to continue to go in. So helps to understand the causes, the underlying causes of these, so that you can pay attention to what's going on out there and why plastics are going the direction that they're headed right now in cost. So with that, we have a very special guest with us today that's going to give you a lot of information about the economy and where we're at right now and why things are like they are. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sim Sheikh to you. If you want to take over, Sim.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking me to participate. I'm happy to do so. I got into the business on April 1st, 1992. Showed up for work 2 weeks before I was officially supposed to start at Paine-Webber, where Alan was one of my first clients. So I'm happy to be coming up on my 30th anniversary in the business. I did the corporate thing for 17 years with Paine-Webber, stayed through the buyout by UBS. And then when the financial world was melting down in 2009, I thought, I'm going to jump off this sinking ship, and started my own advisory firm, Sheikh Investments. And here we are. Dozen years later, and I'm not an economist. I'm not money in banking typically is where you would find inflation experts, people at the Fed, and so on. I do look at it from a concerned investor and investment advisor point of view. So you'll definitely get that angle from me today. So one of the things I love about my business, I enjoy helping people, but mostly I get to look at a broad view of the world. Where can you invest? What should you do? How should you handle things? I can charge 0.25% annually, I think is an appropriate rate, by far less than what anybody else has been charging that I've seen in my years in the business. I have a very capable, licensed, younger business partner who's been with me since the day pretty much I went independent, licensed as well. If you need any help with retirement planning, savings, whatever, questions about buy versus lease, I'm here, I'm available for you. Thank you very much. And I think we should probably begin the meat of the presentation.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Sim. I just want everybody to know what a privilege it is to have Sim on board today. We've known each other for a few years, maybe. I think since we were 6, I think Sim and I first met, and I can tell you firsthand, he is absolutely amazing at what he does. So being able to pick his brain here today is a real privilege for us. So with that, let's hear him talk expertly about what's going on. And Hannah, we could go ahead and start all this up. So sit back and we'll get a little lesson here.
So what is inflation? Inflation is the rising cost of living. It can be from greater demand. People have more money to spend. And it can also come from less supply of things. When things get more rare, they get more valuable. So you can see that if both things are happening simultaneously, you can get higher inflation rates. Has it always been a thing? Pretty much always has been a thing in the United States, with the exception of a few deflationary times, such as the Great Depression, when prices were actually falling. Cost of homes was falling, stocks were falling in price. That was a deflationary period. But other than that, we've had inflation. It's just a matter of how much. A little inflation, a lot of inflation. One example is this $20 gold piece that was issued in 1898. You can see it is legal tender. It is worth $20 to spend it in US currency. And it's legally accepted by banks. Everyone, everywhere around the world would recognize it. When it was issued, it was worth $20, but as you can see now in the market, an ounce of gold is worth over $2,000, depending upon the rarity of the coin itself. So that's a 100 times increase in value of that gold. And that is an example of long-term inflation for over 120 years, 124 years. Let's flip to the next slide, please. Here's a little bit shorter time frame, 1926 to 2021, stocks, bonds, bills, and inflation. And you can see that inflation has caused prices to rise even over the last 95 years, which you could have bought with $1, maybe 16 times what it used to be. But if you invested in stocks, you more than made up for the cost of living increases. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here's one of the things that is blamed for rising inflation is the Fed's balance sheet, which has gone from about $800 billion to $9 trillion just in the last 20 years. And that amount of money found its way into asset inflation. They would make the money available to banks to loan out for investments in real estate. That's why you've seen price of houses double. It found its way into stocks. That's why you saw them triple in the last 10 years. But now you're seeing it finally filter its way into consumer inflation, into everyday goods and services, because the demand has been so great from people to buy and do things that they were not allowed to do and not allowed to buy. And initially, everybody thought it would be a reduction of economic capacity and demand. And it was briefly the COVID lockdown. But then once everybody is able to get out, they really want to spend their money. And the supply chains have been disrupted for various reasons. And you're seeing rising cost of everything, goods, services, labor. If we go to the next screen, we see that what can you do about it? I'm not an economist, of course. I'm a financial advisor going on my 30th year anniversary in the business. And one of my favorite sales pieces from American funds, I love Yosemite. That's a picture of the Yosemite Valley and El Capitan there. And the fund's been around 87 years. So I love looking at the history and actual performance of things. And this is a great educational piece. And early on in the brochure, next slide, please, you have an explanation of inflation and what things cost 40 years ago, back in 1934 when the fund started. But let's look at 1980. The average home was $62,200, and today is $300,000. But if you invested the same $62,200 in this fund, ICA, it's a stock mutual fund, for example, how do you beat inflation? If we go to the next slide, we see that the same amount of money, 62,200 invested in ICA in 1980 would be worth $5.7 million, net of all fees and expenses. And that'd be easy, if you just were Rip Van Winkle and you put your money in, and then all of a sudden your next thought of consciousness was, wow, it's worth 5.7, that's easy. But it isn't easy, it's very emotional. If we flip through some of these slides a little bit quicker, it's an emotional roller coaster. And when you're down, you think you're going to be down forever and you're going to lose forever. And when you're up, you just want to throw more money at it and wish you would have made more. Let's go to the next one. We like to increase the chance of success of beating inflation, getting to your retirement goals. During the last 5 years, 33% of individual stocks lost money. If you just bought your random stock, whatever your favorite thing was, you had 1 in 3 chance you didn't even make money. If you invested in mutual funds and ETFs, you had over a 99% success rate. So that's how we try to increase your chance of success. Compounding is so powerful. One of the smartest people ever called it the 8th wonder of the world, compound interest. If you invest $100,000 at 10% for 10 years, it becomes $259,000. But if you wait 5 years for whatever reason, you're afraid of the markets, you think they're choppy, and you're only invested for 5 years, it's $161,000. That 5-year waiting period costs you nearly $100,000. And that was your initial investment. So you basically got your initial investment back for free if you invested 5 years earlier. We flip through. You can't time the market. Best thing is to be Rip Van Winkle. Put the money in something good, leave it in there. If you try to time it and you miss just the 5 best days, your returns are almost cut in half. If you miss the 25 best days, which typically happen right after the worst days. The worst days happen, people want to get out, and they miss the best days. Missing just the 25 best days costs you all the returns. You're below inflation at that point. Flip to this is you got to keep your losses small, because if you have a 10% loss, you only need an 11% gain to break even. If you have a 50% loss, you need 100% gain just to break even. If you have a 70% loss, you need more than 3 times your money just to break even. You need a 233% return, which is not doable anytime soon. Flip the screen. Warren Buffett said, we don't have to be smarter than the rest. We just have to be more disciplined than the rest. And that's what we try to do with our clients to help them beat inflation.
All right, thanks, Sim. Appreciate that. Now I'm going to take it from here. I'm going to talk about a couple of different subjects regarding inflation and the crazy times that we're living in. One, I want to talk about direct to consumer. Everybody's been talking about e-commerce since the pandemic started and the meteoric rise that it's been on. Then I also want to talk about how retail's had to adjust again for a second and third, fourth time in the last couple of years due to inflation. If you've been following our webinars from Doug and I back to the beginning, one of the things 3A has been doing a really good job of is staying ahead of the curve with everything and trying to give you something to put in your bag that you can take with you for the month. So we're going to try to do that again, trying to stay one step ahead. So the first thing I want to talk, we're having this webinar, this topic this month because inflation is about 7.9%. Highest it's been in 40 years. I think that's a little bit low. I think they're a little bit slow to report on that. I think it's actually probably a little bit real time higher than that, and will certainly get worse before it gets better. But one of the ways that's really affecting retail, which is my specialty, Director of Retail Design and Sustainability, is direct to consumer. So one of the things they said with the pandemic, it only sped up things that were already happening. So a lot of the store closures you saw during the pandemic was really just sped up. They were inevitable, going to happen anyways. The other thing people were talking about was the rise of e-commerce long before the pandemic ever hit. All it did was speed up the rise of e-commerce because you couldn't shop physically in stores for a while. So what we're seeing now is, I don't think we're ever going to have a non-COVID or a post-COVID world like we had talked about, but in the new COVID normal world, seeing COVID moved a little bit back of mind and things move back to normal, inflation's taking over. And inflation is just killing direct to consumer. What used to be, you look down there on the bottom right, container shipping rates, what used to be $2,000 to ship in from overseas is now $15,000. Good luck getting a truck to come into your facility to pick your stuff up. It's like a price war. It's like gambling, just throwing money down, trying to get the highest bidder to come in and pick up your material. And this is absolutely crushing direct to consumer. So that rise that direct to consumer was on flattened out the last couple of months. And now with inflation coming in, it is actually starting to drop back down, and brick and mortar is the one that's actually starting to benefit. And I'll explain a little bit why. But in February alone, direct to consumer was down 3.7%. And that trend is continuing to move faster. A lot of that is just shipping. We talked about shipping, prepaid shipping is killing them. The latest numbers that we have coming in for direct to consumer e-commerce is third quarter numbers. Brands like Warby Parker, Sleep Number, Allbirds, their stocks are going like this, and so are their earnings. Wayfair, for example, lost $78 million in the third quarter last year. Warby Parker lost $91 million. Hims, it used to be online only, that made a decision at the wrong time maybe to go into some brick and mortar, lost 77% of their gross margin. The list goes on and on. But one of the things inflation, supply chain disruptions, and logistics are causing is these direct-to-consumer brands are definitely having a difficult time right now. The second thing I wanted to talk about was retail. If you take a look at retail, the average consumer, Hannah, if you could go forward one, the average consumer is like on the bottom left, just a single consumer, but in a whole, we're like army ants. Consumers, have you ever seen the old Mutual of Omaha videos, where the swarm of army ants come in and take down an entire cow? By ourselves, we're not very impactful, but believe me, as a whole, retail takes notice to everything we do, and consumer behavior is a huge factor in retail and how they go about business. Consumer behavior has changed again. During the pandemic, retailers adapted to a consumer that wanted to go into as few stores as possible, hopefully one stop, and get as many products as possible, as quickly as possible, and get out of the store. So they adjusted to that, putting Gator foam bins, Sintra bins up front, putting the most important products there to get you in and get you out as fast as possible. And that gave a rise to our discount retailers, your Dollar Generals, your Big Lots, your 7-Elevens were going crazy because you could get everything in one stop. But now with the inflation coming along and everybody looking at their wallet going, where'd my money go? And COVID retreating a little bit into the back of their mind, consumers have again shifted, and they're now willing to spend more time into the store, which is very profound to retailers. So they went from getting a person in and out as quick as possible to now they're going back to trying to extend the shopping trip as long as possible and to increase the dollar spend per visit as much as possible. So it's kind of going back to the way it was before, and price optimization has been a huge part of this. Making sure that the products that the consumer wants are price competitive to the consumer compared to their competition. So you're seeing that, and I'll get to that in a minute, where that can be beneficial to you to put in your bag if you're a distributor or a retailer. Another area we're seeing a quick rise in is the self-service checkout, self-service ordering. I took the family to lunch this weekend while we were shopping. We went in and we didn't have a waiter or waitress. We had to order from the kiosk, pick it up ourselves, clean up after ourselves. Even the Amazon Go, they've been on this for a few years now. The touchless in and out kind of shopping is wages. So prices and cost of goods sold for retailers have been skyrocketing. Wages are next to come. That's going to send us into another level of inflation. So the scan and go is just going to become necessary. Every drive-through that I'm working on design with now is less employees, as much automated, as much the consumer doing the work themselves, driving in, picking it up, ordering it. That's to come. But I touched on promotional management is really the key area of retail right now. You see some of these areas here where it's incredibly important for the retailer to get its messaging across as clearly as possible and getting the customer to the product that they want them to get to. So this is a great time for Sintra and Gator products, for an end cap, like you see in the bottom middle one there, drawing people to an end cap so they can get and spend the money on a competitive product there. Sintra for curbside pickup, you see with that Subway sign. Sintra has really taken over for curbside pickup. It's been outstanding. And then a product like Foam Core for a different way of merchandising the Hot Wheels you see in the upper right. So promotional management with Sintra, Foam Core, and Gator is absolutely key right now. And it's a key part, something to put in your bag and take to retail. So with that, I'll hand it off to my partner, as always, Doug Twitchell, and let him talk about some more specific 3A quandaries that we're going through.
All right, thanks, Alan. Yeah, so and it's amazing too, because those things that you're talking about, we're starting to see them more and more frequently around our neighborhoods and where we're going and spending our time and spending our dollars, and you know, so it's fun to watch and see how those things are progressing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, we always hear about plastics and oil and how these things are related and why this impact is there on the cost of oil and how that relates to the cost of plastics. You know, we make composite materials. We make some plastic composite materials. We also make products that contain paper, and we'll take a look at that a little bit and see how all of this has impacted the price of our materials, as we've had so many price increases during 2021 and 2022. We're getting ready to see some more coming through. So a couple of things that, you know, found during the research was that 4% of the world's oil production is used in plastics. So not really a lot, not a big portion of it. There are bioplastics that are out there that are becoming more popular, that are plant-based materials, but the vast majority of plastics are related to crude oil. So taking a look at that and how that happens. So the crude oil is pumped out of the ground, like we all are familiar with, but then it goes in different types of transportation, whether it's pipeline or put in a truck or however it's transported. It goes to an oil refinery. And in the refining process is where this is all separated, where the crude oil is separated into different products that have different functions. So obviously this chart that you see here is oversimplified, but it does show you a little bit in the refining process of crude oil, the different products that you get from there, whether it's lubricating oil, fuel oils, diesel for the trucks, or your gasoline. And the one that you see, the third one from the top, is called Naphtha, and that is the product that is used in a vast majority of the plastics that you use and see every day. So we use a lot of polystyrene, whether it's foam or sheet material, and we use a lot of polyethylene and a lot of PVC. So all of those are going to come from that Naphtha product. So as that naphtha, how do you take that product then and refine it even more down into the plastics that we're using? Well, It's refined even more. It's processed with different mixtures, and it becomes under heat and steam and pressure. Further processing happens, and then you get the molecules. They get longer chains of these molecules, and the creation of those goes into the polymers where they become granules and powders and liquids that go into the plastic processing. So there's a lot of transformation that happens during heat and melting and cooling, and colorants are added. And then they start these initiators that they add to that compound that makes the chains long. And that's what gives the plastics a lot of their strength and features that we've come to appreciate. Then those are extruded into strings, and they're put into grinders where they're converted into pellets. And then those pellets is what is sent out to the manufacturers to heat them, and they go into extrusion, they go into injection molding to make the products that you see every day and that you touch every day. So those prices then, all of this processing that goes on takes heat, which a lot of it is from natural gas, and natural gas prices are rising. The transportation of it right from the ground up to the refinery, all of those prices are increasing because the cost of fuel. Uh, the 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 plastic then is um, transported where it's going to go to the processing, and that transportation cost has increased. So we've seen a lot of this change. And then during all of this, we had some uh, issues with supply chain. And so some resins were in short supply. We had the freeze that happened down in Houston and in Texas area that shut down a lot of manufacturing plants. So that had a big impact because the supply wasn't there anymore. And when you look back and you look at all the clear sheets that are out there now, every store that you go into, every restaurant that you go into, the demand for the clear sheets was huge. They couldn't make it fast enough to supply all of that. So during COVID, there was a lot of demand on that clear sheet, and they were really pumping it out as quickly as they could. But that caused prices to go up also. So going on now and looking at the paper products, our foam core, our gator foam, these products are all paper skins on the material. And the importing availability from China, Alan talked a little bit about the cost that it was to import that material from China, and what the cost of a container has gone up so much that price has to be passed along. So any paper products that were coming in from China, you've seen an increase in the price of that. The delivery on some of those has been very slow because they come into the port, they sit around for a while, then they're unloaded, and some people even had storage fees when they had their container. They wanted their container, but they couldn't get it, and they were paying storage fees to have it sit in the port. So all of those things added up. The North American pulp prices went up 40% in 1 year. The transportation costs 12 loads for every driver that's out there. Drivers could be very selective and charge whatever they wanted to charge to get this material brought to them. Production was down 416 million tons in 2022, 4 million tons less than in 2018. So again, supply and demand. The other thing is a shift in the paper. So paper board, or the cardstock kind of papers, that's taken up 2/3 of the global production now of paper, which is up 50% from pre-COVID years. So you're seeing a lot more of that. Newspaper, writing papers, that's been on a steady decline because of just the way that the computers and everything have impacted that. Not too many newspapers are delivered anymore. And then just the overall inflation of the raw material availability, cost to import, transportation costs, labor shortages, and just the demand uncertainty with what's coming in from China. You know, some of the products that the paper mills now can make, they're being selective on what they're making. They're going with products that have a bigger margin than what some of the other products that maybe we're used to having around, but they can be very selective. There's a certain amount of processing time that they have available, and with the back orders mounting and things, they've become very selective on what they're going to order. So after about 30 years of relative price stability in the paper market, the last couple of years, we've seen some really big changes in paper. And the impact for us on foam core, gator foam, and our furniture grade materials, you know, with foam core, it's a fairly specialized paper that we have to use. There's not a lot of people that make that type of paper. So we're pretty much locked into a few suppliers for that. Gator foam, that paper also was impacted because, you know, some of the gator foam and the furniture grade materials, those paper manufacturers, those are some of the products that they have eliminated some thicknesses. So in our furniture grade materials, we've just had to deal with that they've said, well, the volume on this is too low. We're not going to make this anymore. So we've had that impact. And then the gator foam prices, polystyrene, resin impregnated paper, wood fiber veneer that goes on the gator foam. We've seen increases in all of those. So it's continuing. Hopefully it's going to slow down, but we're really thinking that, you know, fuel prices and everything else that are going on, these price increases are going to continue at least through the third quarter. So with that, Alan.
All right. Thanks, Doug. That was awesome. With that, we'll go back live for what's sure to be a slew of questions, and we'll get to those and answer those and move from there. Thanks. All right. Thanks, guys. We did have a couple questions come in, but right before we run to the question, something I was reminded of when Sim was talking on his part about timing. Sim's amazing about being able to pick out the timing in the market. But to me, it always comes across like the episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza does the opposite effect, where for the first time in his life, he does the opposite of what he would normally do on everything, and his life turns out perfect. That's kind of Sim's amazing at talking about how what it's everything in your mind's like sell, get out of this. It's crazy. Sim's got a great way of bringing you down and keeping you smart on that, because what he said about if you just miss a few days, if you just sell at the wrong time, it changes everything. So I thought of that when Sim was going through that. And then we had a couple questions come in. First one, let's see, I'll throw this one Doug's way, asking about shrinkflation and its role in inflation, I guess, the best way to read that.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've certainly seen that. Matter of fact, on the radio in the car the other day, they were talking about potato chips, and you're getting less potato chips so they can keep that price of the potato chips, that bag of potato chips at the same price. And they're doing the same thing in the candy bars. They're making them smaller, but they're keeping the price there. So you do see that. And I think, you know, if you look back at when I first started in plastics industry, the acrylic and polycarbonate sheet manufacturers, they went to metric thicknesses. And it used to be a 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch thick sheet, or a 0.250 thick sheet. And then at that time, they all went to a metric thickness, making it 3 millimeters, 6 millimeter. And so instead of 0.125, you were getting 0.118. Instead of 0.250, you were getting 0.236. So keeping the thickness down, using less material, less poundage, but trying to keep that price per square foot at a price that the market wanted.
Yeah, and it really hit home for me St. Patrick's Day last week when I bought a 4-pack of pints of Guinness Stout, and they were 14 point something ounces now. They're not 16 ounces anymore. So it's even hitting home that way. Second question, I'll throw this one to Sim, is the impact of workforce participation rate and inflation. That's one for Sim. I'll throw that your way a little bit.
Okay. Labor force participation rate currently runs at 62%, 62.3% of the working age adults are currently working, which is lower than it had been for years. You have to go back 50 years to see it at these levels in the 70s. It used to be as low as 58 and change, 58 to 59% before women really entered the labor force in a large way in the 50s and 60s and 70s. You've needed dual income homes for the most part for a long time, but now people have quit, retired, become disabled. Those people are no longer in the labor force, and the participation rate, which used to be over 67%, is down to 62. So we have fewer workers. That causes shortages try to get a handyman to come fix a small job. It's impossible. So for the workers, the wages are going up. For the consumers, the cost is going up. Obviously, that's inflation, and supply of labor has a lot to do with it. Anything from less immigration to more students. Students typically have a lower participation rate. So, there's a lot of things that can influence it, but overall, we have a shortage of labor. It's not hard to see, especially in particular areas of transportation and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the only thing I'll add is I saw a graphic not too long ago. I should have put in where in 1950 the worker participation was here, and then it went straight up till 2020. And then, was that right, Sim? I thinking it went up,
Yeah,
and then it's kind of since 2000 went straight up to 2000, and then the 2000 it's just been coming straight back down to where it was before. So just a lot of that's attributed to baby boomers. But the other thing I did see was the discrepancy of income between people with high school education from back in 1970, 1980 versus someone with a college education. It used to be like 1.5 times to 1. The college educated person would make. Now it's more like 3 or 4 to 1. So it's dissuading a lot of lower educated people from staying in the workforce, just because the wage gap is just continuing to separate quite a bit on that. So just a couple things I've heard in the past on that. Doug, Sim, any last things before we're a little bit over? So any last things you want to throw out there before we say goodbye to everyone?
Enjoy the spring. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah.
Give me a call if you like. My email address, you can send it to me directly, is sim @sheikinvestments.com, SHEIKH investments.com. Well, I'd be happy to post my phone number or whatever contact information you need.
Perfect. Doug, we're good.
All good.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month on 3A Composites Live Learning. See you next
Thanks,
month.
everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.